We often think today's world is harsh, yet history reveals punishments that pushed human cruelty to its absolute limits. These methods were real, officially sanctioned, and shockingly brutal. They were designed not only to punish, but to terrify entire populations. Let us uncover the 20 worst punishments in history, beginning with number 20. 20. Poena Cullei, the Roman punishment for parricide. In Roman law, crimes were punished according to their moral severity. Among the worst was parricide, the murder of one's own parent. Those convicted faced Poena Cullei, one of history's most disturbing executions. The condemned was first brutally flogged, then forced to wear wooden clogs and a wolf skin hood, symbolizing moral blindness. They were sewn into a leather sack with a dog, rooster, viper, and monkey, animals meant to embody chaos. Carried by oxen to a river, the sack was thrown into the water. Death came by drowning amid terror. Though rarely used, Poena Cullei remains a chilling example of Roman justice. 19. Drawing and quartering. Drawing and quartering was England's ultimate punishment for treason, used from the 13th century until 1867. The condemned was first drawn, dragged to the execution site behind a horse. Hanging often followed, but death was not guaranteed. The true horror lay in the quartering. The body was mutilated, sometimes disemboweled, then torn apart as limbs were tied to horses driven in opposite directions. The remains were displayed publicly across the city as a warning. This punishment was not only meant to kill, but to erase identity and instill terror, reinforcing the absolute authority of the crown. 18. Lingchi, death by 1,000 cuts. Lingchi, practiced in China for centuries, was designed to prolong suffering to its extreme. The condemned was bound to a post while executioners sliced away pieces of flesh methodically. Cuts were deliberately shallow, the victim alive and conscious. Pain accumulated slowly, turning death into a drawn-out ordeal lasting minutes or even hours. The execution typically ended with a fatal cut to the heart or decapitation. Lingchi was meant to punish not only the body, but the soul, denying dignity even in death. The practice was officially abolished in 1905, marking the end of one of history's cruelest punishments. 17. Cropping of ears. Ear cropping was a punishment meant to mark rather than kill. Used across medieval Europe, it involved cutting off a person's ears or nailing them to a pillory. Victims were often left alive to endure public humiliation and lifelong disfigurement. Infections were common and could result in slow, painful deaths. This punishment served as a visible warning, branding criminals permanently. Even when survival was intended, the psychological damage was severe. Cropping of ears illustrates how punishment was often designed to extend beyond execution, turning the human body into a public symbol of shame and control. 16. Death by boiling. Death by boiling was practiced in Europe and Asia and was as horrifying as it sounds. Victims were stripped and lowered into vats of boiling water, oil, or tar. In some cases, The liquid was heated gradually to prolong suffering. Records from Henry VIII's England show victims endured extreme agony, sometimes for hours. Boiling was often used for poisoners, reflecting deep fear of betrayal. This method transformed execution into torture, emphasizing pain over speed. Though eventually abolished, death by boiling stands as one of history's most viscerally cruel punishments. 15. Sawed in half. Sawing was a public execution meant to terrify onlookers. Victims were suspended upside down to slow blood loss, ensuring prolonged consciousness. Executioners sawed through the body slowly, often starting between the legs. The process was deliberately prolonged, turning death into spectacle. Used in the Roman Empire, Spain, and parts of Asia, sawing was not merely an execution, it was a demonstration of absolute power. Few punishments illustrate the intentional prolongation of suffering as clearly as this one, where the goal was not efficiency, but maximum pain and fear. 14. Crushed by elephants. In parts of South and Southeast Asia, elephants were trained as executioners. Condemned individuals were placed beneath the massive animals, sometimes killed instantly, other times slowly crushed on command. In more sadistic cases, elephants broke limbs before delivering the fatal blow. These public executions reinforced royal authority. The sheer size of the animals amplified terror, showing how even nature was weaponized for state violence. 13. The Brazen Bull. The Brazen Bull was a hollow bronze statue shaped like a bull. Victims were locked inside as a fire was lit beneath it, roasting them alive. An acoustic system transformed screams into animal-like bellows. Created in ancient Greece, it merged engineering with sadism. In cruel irony, its inventor was reportedly its first victim. The Brazen Bull exemplifies how human creativity was sometimes devoted not to progress, but to perfecting suffering. 12. Burial of the Vestal Virgins. Vestal virgins were sacred priestesses sworn to lifelong celibacy. Breaking this vow was considered a threat to Rome itself. Direct execution was forbidden, so offenders were buried alive. The condemned was sealed in an underground chamber with minimal food and a lamp. Death came slowly in darkness. This punishment combined religious symbolism with execution, presenting execution as ritual purification rather than violence. 11. Scaphism, the boats. Scaphism, attributed to ancient Persia, is among the most grotesque executions ever described. The victim was trapped between two boats, force-fed milk and honey, and coated with the same mixture. Left exposed, insects consumed the body over days or weeks. Waste accumulation intensified the suffering. Though debated by historians, the account illustrates punishment as prolonged decay rather than immediate death. 10. Crucifixion. Crucifixion was designed to maximize suffering over time. Victims were nailed or tied to a cross, their own weight slowly impairing breathing. Death often came from exhaustion and suffocation. Nails damaged nerves, joints dislocated, and agony lasted for days. Used by many civilizations, It became infamous under Roman rule. Crucifixion combined physical torment with public humiliation, making death slow and degrading. 9. Rat torture. Rat torture turned fear into a weapon. A rat was trapped against the victim's body inside a heated cage. Desperate to escape, the animal gnawed through flesh. This caused extreme physical pain and psychological terror. Used across eras, including modern dictatorships, rat torture shows how cruelty persisted wherever power went unchecked. 8. The rack. The rack stretched the body beyond its limits. Victims were bound while tension slowly increased, dislocating joints and tearing muscles. Bones fractured, breathing became difficult, and survival often meant permanent disability. Used for centuries in Europe, the rack was a tool of interrogation as much as punishment. 7. Keelhauling. Keelhauling was a naval punishment with near-certain death. Sailors were dragged beneath a ship's hull, scraping against barnacles. Drowning, head trauma, or infection often followed. Used by European navies, it enforced discipline through terror. 6. The breaking wheel. Victims were bound to a wheel while bones were shattered with iron bars. The body was then woven into the wheel and left to die. Some survived for days. Used widely in Europe, it turned execution into public warning. 5. Impalement. Impalement forced a sharpened stake through the body, often avoiding vital organs to prolong suffering. Victims could live for days. Bodies were displayed publicly. It was execution as spectacle and dominance. 4. The blood eagle. The blood eagle, described in Norse sources, involved cutting ribs from the spine and pulling out the lungs. Whether literal or symbolic, it represents ritualized cruelty tied to honor and vengeance. 3. Molten Gold. Molten gold execution was punishment through symbolism. Victims were restrained while molten metal was poured into the mouth, destroying internal organs instantly. Often reserved for the wealthy or accused of greed, it turned death into a twisted moral lesson. 2. Flaying. Flaying involved removing skin while the victim was alive. Death came from shock or infection. Used notably by the Assyrians, it was meant to terrorize populations. Skins were sometimes displayed as warnings. 1. The Roman candle. The Roman candle stands as one of the most horrifying execution methods in history. Under Emperor Nero, Christians were bound to tall wooden stakes soaked in flammable substances and ignited, deliberately set alight at the feet to prolong their suffering. These executions were staged at night, transforming victims into living torches that illuminated Nero's gardens during his gatherings. Human lives were reduced to decoration. Pain turned into entertainment. The Roman candle was more than execution, it was spectacle. A chilling symbol of unchecked power, it reveals how cruelty reaches its peak when entire groups are stripped of humanity. These punishments are not relics of a distant past. but reminders of what humanity becomes when fear replaces compassion and power goes unchallenged. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the notification bell. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more dark history.